Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football. Today's show is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico. See all the ways that you could save. We are on to week 14, and it is a full house here on Fantasy Focus. Full house. All right. Field, Stephania, Mike, and Daniel. Seriously.
First time ever or no?
Danny Tanner? Would you be Danny Tanner if
Probably.
we were in this? Is Mike Uncle Jesse or Uncle Joey?
I want to be.
a funny one.
Yeah.
I'll take both of those. I'm cool and funny.
It's actually kind of, you can't go wrong there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because like
I'm
Uncle
like,
Jesse,
yes.
just John Stamos, stone cold stud still all these years later, right?
That sounds like me.
Meanwhile,
Wow.
Uncle Joey, Dave Coulier, one of the great French Canadians in French Canada history. So, did I say that correctly or no?
In French Canadian
know.
history?
Yeah.
French, but anyways, love me some Dave Coulier. You really can't go wrong.
Yeah, I like all of those things. I am all those things, so I'll take it.
Yeah, Field, I think you have to be Danny Tanner because you're like the dad that keeps us all together in a situation. Stephania, who do you want to be in this full house
Not the
situation?
one who was.
I guess I'm dead.
Not
in
the
this
one who broke
circumstance,
some
right?
laws,
Yeah.
right?
R.I.P. Bob Saget. Yeah.
I want to move on.
Okay.
That's what I want to do.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, all right. Well, in
Fine,
case
says
you
we're moving
were
on.
Well,
The show
listen,
took place in the Bay Area, even if it was it?
I know. Well, the best part is the Victorians in the in the open.
All right.
Why
Unlike
is this a sore
the
subject?
no, I just I just want to make reference to yesterday. I saw the cone.
What? What are you
I
talking
saw
about?
what y'all did.
Stephania.
And then you put a 49ers helmet on it.
Well,
Like, you should respect my privacy this time.
Wow.
There's a lot going on in San Francisco, and yet you managed to make fun
Listen,
of me.
you put the 49ers helmet on it, and then what happened was Daniel went to try and remove the cone, and then it sacked him.
that's what happened.
As a testament to the 49ers defense. It's your fault,
I
Stephania.
actually pulled a hamstring trying to move the cone, Stephania. That's what it was.
Good.
That one
That's
might
what you
fly a
get.
little bit
That's what
close
you
to the
get.
sun because he literally, like Kyle Shanahan is actually going to be signed to the 49ers active roster this week. That's how thin they are.
That's as emotional as I've seen.
We're going to get there. Yeah. All right. We got a lot to be able to talk about today. We got a Monday Night Football recap. We got a bunch of guys that we're going to talk about. Some
Can I start with
rankings on.
something here on the
Yeah,
Monday
of
Night Football
course.
recap?
Yeah.
First of all, if you watch this game,
God bless you.
Yeah, seriously. Getting through it was
way
that
to
was
go.
a
You
chore.
earned yourself
That was
something.
a
I don't know
chore.
whether if you're a coffee drinker, like
Miller Lite, an extra Miller Lite.
there you go.
is-
Miller Lite, do that. If you drink coffee, go out and grab yourself a coffee. Don't make the stuff at home today. If you are normally a person who eats a salad for lunch, have a club sandwich today because you made it through that game. That disgusting display of football
It was
for
bad.
57 minutes, and then Tom Brady did Tom Brady things.
Yeah, I watched Troy and Joe for a while, who we love, and then I was just
course.
like, you know what? I need to spice up this game a little, so I went to Peyton and Eli, and that helped. I
Yeah.
mean, that helped
You know what I did?
make it a little more palatable.
I had some wine.
Yeah, see, there you go. That
win.
always makes Monday
I
Night
win.
Football
I
a
was
little bit
pissed.
better. Looking at the scoreboard here, Bucs beat the Saints 17-16, and I want to start.
Saints beat themselves, to be clear.
They
Yeah,
really
let's
did.
be honest.
They really did. Alvin Kamara, let's start with the Saints. Alvin Kamara has been so tough for fantasy managers, Mike. When I look at him, under 13 fantasy points in 5 straight, and 4 of those 5, he has had single-digit games. We're getting
That's
into
tough.
playoff contention here. What do managers do with Alvin Kamara when it's games like this?
I think the biggest shocker during that game was right around halftime. You're looking at snap counts, and Mark Ingram was out snapping Alvin Kamara, which was definitely a shocker. We don't expect that. So he's being limited to some extent. But on the other hand, if he came out next week and had 150 yards and scored 2 touchdowns, you wouldn't be surprised.
I would be
And
surprised.
You would be?
They're on a bye. So I'd be surprised. Yeah.
The week after that.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I'd be surprised.
It is Alvin Kamara. He's still fantastic. He's heavily involved in the passing game. There's reason
Except
to
for last
believe
night
he
he
can
wasn't.
bounce back. Yeah,
Yeah, so it is a little bit weird, though. It is weird. There are a couple of things, not to take Mike to task here, but I did find the passing game utilization very curious last night because there was hardly any as far as design passes go.
Right.
I think he had 1 or 2 catches, and both of them were on broken plays where they turn it into a dump off to Alvin Kamara. And the second thing was, if you go look at his exact snap share, like Mark Ingram was playing a ton, but he got hurt. As a matter of fact, his injury, it was kind of nagging during the game, and it was the game-changing play. Mark Ingram talked about this. He took to Twitter and said, I'm sorry for this, but there was a play late in the game, second and I think it was 8. They threw a little dump-off pass to Mark Ingram out in the flat, who, if he gets the first down, it may be enough to salt away the game, barring a miracle.
Yep.
He just kind of comes up lame and stops down a yard short, and the
bad.
Saints go back-to-back plays, or I think they actually tried a slant on 3rd down, couldn't convert, they end up punting it. So maybe Mark Ingram's injury opens the door to a busier Alvin Kamara. Not next week, but the week after.
Yeah, my point though is we're still starting out
of course.
Kamara, right? I mean, I don't know where we're ranking him, where you ranked him this week. We'll see. We'll talk about.
Well, I
that
have
in
him
the
ranked
next 48 hours.
like 487 this week because they're not playing.
This week, yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Just move. All right, I'm done talking about the Saints. Let's move on.
All right. What about Chris Olave, Phil? Because when I look at Chris Olave, too, he's been a guy that I've sort of talked about being quarterback agnostic. And while he has hit that floor of like 10 fantasy points, he has not peaked with the way that the Saints offense has been playing lately.
Yeah, offense matters. Offense matters for wide receivers, right? And I suppose running backs too, but less so with star running backs. You can have a star running back in a really bad offense, but with wide receivers, if you're not finding the end zone, it's going to be a problem. And it's not his fault, right? I mean, there was one bad drop from Chris Olave last night that I was stunned to see. It was his first drop of the season.
He
but
was
still,
probably bored. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Like the rest of us. He was thinking about wine. After the game.
But, you know, just like bigger picture, because like you're going to continue to start him other than next week. Yeah.
Clearly the preferred
And I would just say, like, you see star potential with Chris Olave. It's very obvious, very evident. Jameis Winston, I don't think he's going to take over as a starting quarterback at any point this season. Even with the loss last night, the Saints are still on the periphery of the NFC South because it's such a disgrace of a division. It seems like it's Andy Dalton's job the rest of the way. I think Olave kind of is what he is. Right?
Yeah. Hasn't had a high ceiling, but he's had a high floor, right? So you can still justify
Low-end
him as
RB2,
at least a
wide
wide
receiver
receiver
2.
3 or flex for sure.
Yep.
At worst.
When you look at these Buccaneers,
I prefer not to.
yeah. and when you look
Honestly.
at the score, you would think that maybe Tom Brady had some sort of a decent game, but 54 passes?
Yeah, he
54 passes, and
The
he doesn't
volume's
even
absurd.
hit 300 yards. Those 2 touchdowns came very late in the game. The
Yeah,
entire
like the last
offense looked
5
awful
minutes.
the entire game. So
Terrible.
in spite of what this looks like field, when I look at the fantasy points that Tom Brady scored this week, I don't feel confident that like 17.1 fantasy points is a thing with the way that this offense is playing. Like I don't even know how to be able to
10 of
quantify
those,
this.
if not more, came within the last 3.5 minutes of the game. So you got saved by the Saints' own errors late in this game, and just watch it. It's so far from what we have grown accustomed to for Tom Brady. It's not a functioning offense. They can run the football okay on occasion, but not consistently. They can't throw the football down the field at all. They have absolutely no upside down the field. And Chris Godwin has been renamed to Chris Edelman. A guy who in the past has been, and by the way, that should
guys.
be a compliment.
Mood
we just said
lighting.
some mood lighting.
Mood lighting.
There we go.
A little mood
I
lighting.
kind of like that. That was cool.
And I mean that with great reverence for
That was
both
the
Chris
Bucs
Godwin
offense.
and Julian Edelman. Yes, it was. Because Edelman, an unbelievable player, but basically what Godwin has become is a guy who in previous years averaged like 14, 15 yards per catch. Now he's more like 10 yards per catch. And last night, it was actually less than that. 8 catches on 13 targets for 63 yards. He is an extension of the running game because they can't pass protect whatsoever, especially with no Tristan Wirfs.
No,
right now.
but wait a minute, Mike. Mike Evans must have had a huge game because I was told that Marshawn Lattimore didn't play in this one, and he is the kryptonite to Mike Evans.
Or maybe it's just the Saints are the kryptonite because this is 9 straight games. He's been under 13 fantasy points against the Saints. They just have his number. So it's been rough for Evans as of late, but he's still out there playing every down and one of the top targets in this offense. But it's been a rough month. But, you know, I don't really think my opinion of this offense really changed much last night. It's the same. Like Brady's a good QB2 because he has a high floor because he throws it 50 times sometimes, right? Like that's it.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're not looking for good QB2s.
Yeah, I know that. That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
Yeah.
But nothing changed. Like maybe if the matchup's great, you think about streaming him in deeper leagues, but that's it, right?
Yeah,
it's
unless
what he's been
you-
all season. This is
The
what he's
only way
been.
that Tom Brady is guiding you to a fantasy championship this year is if you absolutely smash the draft elsewhere.
Yeah.
What about those running backs, Stephania? Like, do you look at after last night the way that they used both Rashad White and Leonard Fournette, and it's not just both on the ground game, but both of them were heavily utilized in the
Yeah.
passing game too.
Well, I think clearly Leonard Fournette's been displeased with what's happened lately, right? He's expressed it. And I thought that the way Tom Brady, like, if you watched any of the post game, I mean, bad enough if you stayed up to watch the entire game, but if you actually watched the post game pressers, and Brady was like awfully gleeful. And I get it. Like they came back and won what he did in the last couple minutes. And for him personally, that was like his biggest comeback besides that Super Bowl thing that happened against the Falcons. But he was really highlighting Leonard Fournette, you know, and talking about him and talking about how great Lenny was and this and that. And I thought that spoke to what we've already talked about before, which is that he feels the need to keep him happy. And when Leonard Fournette wasn't happy, that was a problem. They still didn't do enough for me on offense to make me excited about either one. Just if anything, just more of a backfield mess like so many other places.
If Tom Brady keeps throwing the ball 50-some times, then I'm hopeful that these running backs can just have high floors because of passing game usage.
Because they have to. They can't throw the ball down the field.
Yeah.
They tried a couple times with Julio Jones last night, and he missed by if on the 3 throws, it was like a combined 19 yards of separation between Julio Jones and where the ball landed. That's not good, right? Mike Evans had the one late defensive pass interference play, but even that was probably it felt like more luck than it was, sort of like design for the Bucs. And these backs are going to continue to get utilization because constantly under duress is Tom Brady. And I don't know that it gets better until Tristan Wirfs returns. And even then, I'm not sure it gets that much better. Yeah. So these 2 running backs are definitely both playable. They just eat away from each other, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd say both flex options. I mean, if you watch the game, you saw a lot of Rachaad White early, and then he scored the game-winning touchdown. You're probably thinking, well, he's the guy where you rank higher now, right? Like, he's the preferred guy, but he was outsnapped by 14.
Yeah.
Fournette played a lot in that game.
More.
It's a 2-headed committee now. This is not really a 1A and 1B. They're both just going to rotate in and out. I don't feel great about it. The Bucs can't score points. You know what I mean? They're both flex options at best, but you don't feel great about it.
All right, let's move on and talk about some news. Go from the downer of a Monday Night Football game to some injuries with Stephania.
More of a downer.
Stephania, we're going to run through a bunch of these, and obviously we're going to continue to monitor all of this as we get throughout the week, but our first crack at the injury updates with you. We're going to start with Lamar Jackson, who has a knee injury. Sounds like he is unlikely to play this week, but what can you tell us about Lamar?
Yeah, when he left the game, I mean, he went down at one point and it didn't look great, and he ends up going out of the game, and he has come into the last few weeks banged up with a number of things, whether it's an illness or a hip injury or a quad issue. Like, he just hasn't looked like himself, and I think that partly accounts for why we haven't seen Lamar Jackson running the ball the same way as he used to. But now we know he has a knee injury, although we don't know exactly what. They've been very vague on it. John Harbaugh, this was his wording, so I just want to share for the people who didn't hear it because it's so vague. He goes, he's been through the MRIs. This was his update to the media yesterday. I would say it's kind of week to week. It's going to be a weekly thing. As the week goes on, we'll see for this week. It's probably less likely for this week, but not impossible. After that, it'll become more and more likely. I just want to share with you, this is the kind of stuff we have to sift through to get information. That is the most redundant, useless John Harbaugh presser about an injury that I've heard in recent memory. So
that was not great.
No. And the thing is, with Lamar being as mobile quarterback as he is, a knee thing can be so many different things. And while you can look at a couple of the videos, you're not sure exactly where the injury happened. I do think it was when he went down hard on his leg at one point, landed on his knee. You just can't speculate about what it is. So bottom line is, my takeaway is, I don't expect Lamar this week. And then we'll see. It's week to week after that.
Quick conversation around what this offense can look like without Lamar under center. They just signed Brett Hundley.
He's on the practice squad. I assume he'll be promoted over Anthony Brown, who's also on the practice squad. They have a very, their backup quarterbacks and their practice squad quarterbacks are set up to be utilized similar to Lamar Jackson, and that's going to be the case for Tyler Huntley, and he looked pretty good. I mean, Denver's defense is really good. He had 187 passing yards, ran for 41 yards, had a touchdown on 10 carries in that game. So that was pretty good. Gives you some inspiration that he could be maybe a QB2, sneak into the QB1 conversation perhaps with his legs. But keep this in mind. Last year, he played 5 games in place of Lamar Jackson. He had that huge game against the Packers. Remember that? That was his only top 15 finish. He really struggled other than that. So I'm not super optimistic here. I think if you're in a super flex league, you definitely want to scoop him up, but otherwise, he's not going to just slide right in there for Lamar Jackson.
The only things that he has going for him this year compared to last year is that the quarterback spot is so much weaker this year that if Tyler Huntley can get you 15 to 18 fantasy points in a given week, you might be jumping for joy for that, right? Just because of the way the quarterback position has shook out so far this year. But to take Mike's point one step further, if you include this past Sunday, which, by the way, he completed 84.4% of his passes, he's got 6 meaningful games going back to last year. As a runner, 43 carries during those 6 meaningful games. That's over 7 per game. That's a good number. 6.45 yards per carry. That's a good number as well. And while completion percentage is not a stat that tells anywhere close to the whole story, he's been above 70% of his above 70% completion percentage in 3 of those 6 games. So if he throws the ball 20, 25 times, you feel pretty comfortable. There's a chance he might complete 17, 18, 19, 20 passes, which might be enough to get you 200, 215 so passing yards. So I actually think he's a reasonable option this week, especially because there are some guys that are on the fringe in a week in which we have 6 teams on a bye that have really terrible matchups. Like, I want no part of Tom Brady as an example. Mike White's been good recently. Now he plays Buffalo as an example. There are some quarterbacks who are going the wrong way this week. So Huntley could sort of sneak maybe into like top 12 to 14, depending on how a couple of other things develop this week with quarterbacks.
Yeah, he might be your best option if your quarterback's on a bye. So I'm with you there. I have him like QB 15, so that means he's at least on the streaming radar.
Yep.
I'm with you.
All right, let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa real quick. Stephania, what's the update we have on him?
Well, he injured his ankle late in the game, and then Skylar Thompson comes in to replace him for the final drive against the 49ers. I think this was as much about, like, why bring Tua back in at that point and why risk making something worse. It didn't sound like it was anything significant. He was talking to reporters after the game. You know, the good thing for the Dolphins is they're actually staying in California this week. They play the Chargers. I think that game was flexed to Sunday night.
Dolphins are getting the short of the stick now. I'll tell you about that in a second.
Yeah, but they're not traveling back. So you know, that's actually a good thing when you're dealing with an injury situation because you can rest there. You don't have to deal with getting in the airplane and all that. So I think that helps them. They'll take a day to regroup. I don't expect him to be compromised at all for this game.
Good news there. As far as schedule stretches go, though, 49ers who play at San Francisco this past week, that's not listen, you have to play them. You have to play them at some point. You're playing them not in the 1 p.m. window. No issue there. But they get flexed into Sunday Night Football, which means that the following week is already a little bit shorter, right? You're traveling a handful of hours later. And their game against Buffalo was pushed up to Saturday from Sunday. As yesterday, the NFL announced a triple header for Saturday of Week 15. So Miami goes at San Francisco, at LA prime time, at Buffalo in prime time the following Saturday. That's a tough stretch.
Well,
right there
and think
for
about
the
by the
Dolphins.
time they get back, it's like the middle of the night between Sunday and Monday. So Monday, think how you feel
that's
when you're
best
traveling
case, right?
like red eye
You're
and
getting
the
back
next
at like
day
10
and you got to
a.m.,
play
yeah.
on Saturday.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah, just to reiterate that, 2 full days of football next week. Like Saturday's a 1, 4, and 8. And then same thing Sunday. It's
pretty great.
Instead of 1 full day of football, 2 full days.
Weirdly, I have nothing. I canceled all plans. For
No plans for a
17th.
Saturday. Yeah, that's how it works.
Sounds like a good day to me.
Stephania, we saw, unfortunately, Ken Walker III go down with what is being called a jammed ankle.
Well,
How?
just as John Harbaugh was very useless in all of the non-information he gave, Pete Carroll might have been as useless in all the over-detailed information he gave. So let me share with you what we're trying to parse through on Ken Walker, who did leave the game in the first half with what Pete Carroll said originally was a jammed joint, okay? Which is a real thing. I'll tell you about that.
That sounds even worse than what you just said.
But then later on his radio appearance, Pete Carroll said that it was more of a right ankle strain. And let me tell you his words. A strain in a particular part of his foot. Well, and he said ankle earlier. So a particular part of his foot that we've just got to help him through and see if we can get it to quiet down. A little space that's just aggravated on the inside of his ankle. A very unusual injury. What are we talking about? Is it his foot? Is it his ankle?
I know, it's a little space
unusual.
inside of his ankle.
We saw the
playing next
MRI.
week.
It's
Just tell us if he's playing next
like we don't know. And a jam joint. So here's the thing. It's hard to say because now they say he has a chance to play. Okay, so they have a chance. But we've heard Pete Carroll do this before and say, if they quiet, and we're going to give him every opportunity, and then he ends up not playing. When I heard jam joint, and I actually tweeted about this, because you can at your ankle, like if you land hard and you kind of force your ankle up into you can get a bone bruise, you can get a capsule, and that is a wait and see approach. So him talking about we just got to wait and see. But the thing about being, a strain, when you hear the word strain, that typically means that it's a muscle or a tendon, okay? When you hear a jam joint, that's a joint, a cartilage. So these are, when I tell you, like, this is what we have to parse through, it's not so simple. So now you see on the chyrons, it always, foot strain. I'm like, I don't know that that's really what it is.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We'll see what he does in practice, but they have a problem because they have multiple running backs hurt. You know, we've got Travis Homer, who has a sprained knee, who also had an illness. DJ Dallas, who had a high ankle injury, but somehow came back and played through it, which is, yeah, but it's like you never want to see that if you're dealing with that kind of an injury. It's just not a great situation.
Yeah.
Tony Jones Jr.
Yep.
There it is.
Head injury, left the game after a big hit
Which
that
is
he
why
took.
Yep.
we saw DJ Dallas. I mean, they're basically like, can you make it through the game?
So we are working with nothing more than breadcrumbs right now. But if you want to take a look at things that did not happen on Monday, the Seahawks did not go add anybody to their practice squad. They did not go ahead and sign anybody off of a practice squad elsewhere. They do have one practice squad running back right now. I'm going to totally butcher his last name. He used to play for your Lions, Daniel. Godwin Igwebuike. Igwebuike, excuse me. Apologies for that one, Godwin. And so take from that what you will or won't. I think this is one of those that if anybody is suggesting what's going to happen with the Seahawks backfield right now, unless that person is on the Seahawks coaching staff or personnel staff, you can ignore that because it's probably nothing more than a
I heard
guess.
Marshawn Lynch is going to work out.
Dang, that was my joke. I was going to be like, doesn't he still live in the Seattle area? He's just like full-time practice squad.
Yeah, I think he
thought.
manages a couple of Applebee's up there, doesn't he?
I'm
There
sure.
it is, yeah.
I'm sure. At least.
Get him some Skittles.
I
He'll be
just,
good to
I
go
just
this
want
week.
him to take a golf cart to the field. That's
Dude,
something.
wow, yeah. Watch out. Watch out.
might.
All right, Stephania, let's talk about Cortland Sutton.
But just to round it out, there is a chance, and I don't want you, yes or no, there is a chance Ken Walker could play on Sunday.
They're saying there's a chance.
Okay, so there's a chance. There's a chance. Again, well, I'm not holding you to. I'm just saying,
No,
there is a world in which
that
Ken
is-
Walker the third plays on Sunday. Just for people who are out there saying like, oh crap, am I going to be without this guy who's been a star for me of late?
You should probably make plans just in case because
yeah.
we would assume
Have to,
elsewise.
yeah.
But like, yeah. Okay. Stephania, with Cortland Sutton, hamstring injury, as if the Broncos needed more woes to their offense.
Yeah, and this on top of he wasn't healthy coming into this game. He's been dealing with the illness. He's had stuff going on in addition to their offense just being terrible. And now a hamstring injury that I think we're not going to see him this week.
Which Broncos player are you
That
starting
stinks,
with confidence in fantasy, Mike Clay?
With confidence, their defense.
Okay.
And
Patrick
rigidity
Surtain.
if Sutton's
Patrick
out.
Surtain.
Honestly, not their defense.
Greg Dulcich is.
Greg Dulcich
Greg
just
Dulcich
started
is-
to
Yeah,
come
their
back
defense
a little
against
bit.
the Chiefs. It's not like their
Oh, no,
defense
not,
has been
yeah,
good.
not
yeah.
against the Chiefs. This is just in general.
But
Like,
it
you
hasn't
could
even been that
consider them-
good. Like, to be honest with you, like it just.
Probably because they're just tired.
Well, honestly,
They're just-
Stephania,
I- I-
it
I mean, yeah.
actually is much more about. I think that's probably part of it because they play a ton, but they're so good. But just like real defense and fantasy defense do not correlate that much.
All right, Brandon McManus.
Okay,
Does
that's
that work
about
for
it.
you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But Dulcich was tight
Greg
and won
Dulcich
this
is good.
past
Yeah,
week,
yeah.
so probably that's about it. And that's only because he plays tight end and he's healthy and he's
Yeah.
able.
I tweeted this yesterday. The Cowboys in the last 3 weeks have scored more touchdowns offensively than the Broncos have this whole season.
Oh my gosh.
That is
Stop
unbelievable.
it.
It's
That's
disgusting.
unbelievable.
Say that again.
Disgusting.
The
It's either
Cowboys?
the last 3 or 4 weeks the Cowboys have
Okay.
scored more touchdowns than
Wow.
Denver has this
Broncos.
entire season.
Disgusting.
It's amazing. It's
Have you guys
amazing.
seen the
for us.
Russell Wilson bathroom touchdown
Yes,
ratio?
it's so good. The meme.
I don't even know. I saw it, but I don't know.
No.
what
It's
it is.
the
Please
number of
don't.
touchdown, a number of bathrooms that Russell has in his house is
Oh,
12, and
okay,
he has
okay.
yet to throw that many. So we're hoping to be able to have a 1-to-1 ratio by the end of the season.
Okay.
I
Wow,
cannot wait
that's-
to see what happens this offseason.
Yeah.
Because the
It's-
anonymous sourcing stories are going to be left
Oh.
right out of Denver. It's everybody
Oh, yeah.
else's fault, but here's the bottom line. You guys stink.
Yeah, they
Stink.
are not good.
I'm just thinking coaching change, and they go from there. I mean,
Well, fortunately, they do have a top 3 pick, which
Oh, wait.
they don't.
they don't have the top 3 pick. Got it.
Yeah,
this
makes
is
it
like
tough.
when we talked about this situation in the offseason, we were like, okay, what's worst case scenario? This is way below worst case scenario.
yes.
There's no way. Like
We
you thought
couldn't
they
even
can't score at
imagine
all.
it.
Like
We could
yeah.
not
The
imagine.
problem
it.
is that
I
the
don't get
Broncos
it.
are what the Seahawks with what we thought the Seahawks might be, and the Seahawks what the Broncos we thought might be.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
the
that's a
problem.
great. Yeah, they've absolutely flipped. Stephania, let's close out this injury segment.
Yeah, I know where we're
Unfortunately,
going.
We got to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo out for the season, but we're just going to open up the floor for you here.
Yeah, I contemplated bringing a glass of wine and just pouring one out for Jimmy G because I think this is like the most
Problem is you drank all of them
unfair.
last night during that Monday
I know
football
I
game.
did. There's none left. Drown my sorrows. I think that this one, I get it. I'm a Niners fan. of course I'm going to be sad, but I'm just sad. You guys know I get sad when you have guys who have tough breaks with injuries, consecutive years. This is the most unfair injury situation I could imagine, because this guy fought through to the NFC Championship last year with a torn ligament in his thumb and a shoulder that was slipping out the backside and never complained. Ends up going through shoulder surgery, has an uncertain future, has to practice and rehab on the side field while the Niners are moving ahead with Trey Lance, but comes in graciously, handles everything with class to be the backup guy and step up and take over when Trey Lance gets hurt. And now this happens, yet another season-ending injury. When I saw him go down, and everybody was talking about the landing on his foot, I actually thought that it's a torsional injury. When his foot got caught and rotated through the grass, I'm like, man, that does not look good. And as soon as he didn't come back for the second half, never appeared on the sideline, I was like, he's done for the year. This is going to be a foot injury that cost him the season. Kyle Shanahan said afterward he broke a few things in his foot. So what does that tell you? The torsional injury, breaking a few bones, that is a Liz Frank injury in the middle of his foot. And now there's conversation about whether he'll have surgery or not. Here's the criteria. If you have a stable Liz Frank injury, so even if there's fracture, the bones are not displaced, that can heal over time. And ideally, you'd love to not have to go in and operate if you don't have to, but it's still a multiple month recovery, 3 months to 4 months at best. And
It's tough.
All right, so
Who knows?
who do you got? Do you got Brock Purdy, Josh Johnson, Baker
allow
Mayfield,
me my space to
or Field Yates?
grieve before I move on.
Pick your quarterback.
I actually thought Brock Purdy played
Brock Purdy
really
played
well.
really well.
Yeah. I mean,
Really
can you
well.
imagine coming in like that situation, coming in and you're him, and now all of a sudden you have to step it up and save the game. I mean, I thought he did really, really well, and I think he'll function fine in the offense. I thought Fred Warner said it perfectly afterward. He's like, he plays against the best defense in the league all the time in practice.
Yep.
And so Brock Purdy throwing a lot over the middle, I thought that is going to be where he's going to survive. That's going to actually help him. And he's got to get rid of the ball fairly quickly. Think of the defense. Again, he's facing that front four every week in practice.
Does he have guys on his team that are good at being able to get the ball at or behind the line of scrimmage? Oh, like CMC or Debo Samuel maybe?
Yeah, and Debo was still hurt. You could tell that he was not 100%. And he performed better than I expected, given the fact that he was dealing with that thigh contusion. But you saw that it was a problem. He couldn't fully open it up like normal.
By the way, we've seen Kyle Shanahan have an offense that scores points with C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins, so it would not be shocking if they're still scoring 2.5 touchdowns per game with Brock Purdy in there. So
Wouldn't surprise me.
Would it be
especially with those skill
shocking
guys.
if they scored 2.5 touchdowns per game with Baker Mayfield under center? Is there any?
That's not
is there
happening.
any chance that like with them signing?
If someone's going to save Baker's career, it would probably be Kyle Shanahan, right? I mean, there's a short list of quarterbacks that, or
Yeah,
of,
but
play
he
callers
said
that
they're
could-
fine where they are. I
Yeah.
believe those were his words. That's not
I
happening.
suspect Baker will be claimed today. I would be surprised if it's San Francisco, but I got some spider senses that he'll be claimed.
Yeah.
Oh,
What do we
share
think?
to share
Where do we want
where
him?
we
Houston?
think he's gonna go.
All
I was
right.
thinking Cleveland probably.
Yeah.
Cleveland, maybe Kansas City. They could use a quarterback, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's move ahead. We're going to talk Rollin or Foldin. We're going to take a look at some players over the last month that have put together some decent fantasy performances, and it's not whether or not we're in on them.
Yeah.
It's
Can I
whether or
offer one piece of advice for shouldn't it be Holdin or Foldin? Wouldn't that make more sense?
because you're
Yeah, 'cause
holding.
Because you got to know when to hold them and
Rolling.
know when to fold them.
Keep rolling or
Is that-
eventually fold.
No.
That's too many
Yeah.
words.
Yeah,
We'll
so
workshop.
Know when to fold them.
So I
know
think-
when to walk away. Know when to run.
so because it's
Not
not.
even-
Yes, I
not
do.
biting
Kenny Legan
at
or
all.
not Kenny Legan? Kenny Rogers.
Shout out to Kenny Legan.
Shout out Kenny Legan.
Great guy at ESPN.
He is a great guy here at ESPN. All right, this is about whether or not the players keep it rolling or whether or not you think they're going to fold in the second half here towards the end of the year, not whether or not we are holding them. So for the players, we're going to start with Trevor Lawrence.
And just to note that if you hear numbers referenced in these players' descriptions, it's because it's over the past 4 weeks. So weeks
Oh,
10 through
good point.
13
Field
on a
Yates.
per game
Yes.
basis. When you hear us say Trevor Lawrence has averaged 20.8 fantasy points per game, that's not for the full season.
No,
or else we'd be
that's-
talking about Trevor Lawrence in a much different light throughout the year. But he has been good of late. So what do you think, Daniel? You in
Quarterback
on
6, right? Over the last, from weeks 10 through 13, 20.8 points per game. He gets the Tennessee Titans this upcoming week, which is a matchup that I like. But again, I don't know. I feel like this has been one of those roller coaster type of situations with a second-year quarterback. You can see some ups and downs, and we're about to be in a situation where past next week, there are no more bye weeks. So I don't see Trevor Lawrence as a guy that I'm going to be starting, I think, on a consistent basis, unless I'm in like a 12 or 14, 16-team league where he's at the back end of my quarterback radar.
Yeah, he's still a streamer, right? He's what he's been all season when the matchup is right. You're using him, and he's been really good as of late, at least 16 fantasy points in 4 straight and 6 of his last 7. But look, he plays the Titans this week. Great matchup. They allowed a ton of yardage, touchdowns, fantasy points to
Everybody.
quarterbacks. But then Dallas, at the Jets, and even at Houston, that doesn't, teams don't throw against them. They don't allow much in terms of fantasy points. And then it's Tennessee again if you play in Week 18. But, I mean, there's a stretch of 3 straight games where I'm not going to feel great using him. Probably be a front-end QB2, not a QB1. So, tough remaining schedule overall. He is what he is.
He is what he is.
He's a streamer when the matchup's right.
Lucky that he stayed in that game, by the way. That was scary.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
But sounds like he's doing okay.
That was an ugly-looking injury, but
Yeah.
Hoping
Body's
nothing
fine.
progresses. Yeah, very, very glad. Field, Daniel Jones has been quarterback 11 over those last 4 weeks. However, he doesn't really have any pass catchers, and he gets the Eagles this week. In fact, he gets the Eagles twice over the next little while. What do you think about Daniel Jones here for the rest of the season?
Pretty much what Mike just said, right? He's a streaming option based off of the matchup. Philadelphia is a defense that I would prefer to avoid, all things being equal. Washington, he just played. You saw how he can perform against them. They play in 2 weeks. I'm fine with that one. Minnesota, week 16, fine with that one. Indianapolis and Philadelphia, to wrap things up, I would prefer not to be starting Daniel Jones. He is what he has been throughout the season. So I would say, I guess I'll be a little bit more focused on this week because I think it's hard to focus entirely on the next 5 weeks, and I will be folding on Daniel Jones. I do not want a piece of him this week against the Eagles.
I think that it's going to be tough for Daniel Jones.
I mean, this game could get out of hand, right? The Eagles could be up big, and Daniel Jones, he could rush for 60 yards and a touchdown. I just would think that
could salvage
it's
his day.
also possible that the Giants score 10 points on Sunday against Philly.
Stephania, what about Jared Goff? Jared Goff has not been awful. This offense
thought you
has
were
been
going to take
trending
this
back
one.
up.
I mean,
Nah,
come on.
It's easy for me to take
I
this when
know.
everyone expects it.
Right.
Again, Minnesota, this upcoming week, he has had over 17 fantasy points in consecutive games. Is there enough here that you can at least look at Jared Goff as someone that you would consider utilizing towards the last month of fantasy?
Maybe at the last month. Looking at his matchups against Carolina, maybe Chicago, but I don't love him. I don't love him this week against the Vikings. I don't love him against. Well, all right. Field loves him.
I love him against the Vikings.
yeah. I mean, yeah.
He's fine. I mean, but I don't necessarily expect him to be more than what he's been. I actually have him as a second quarterback in the league, and I think he's been useful in that range. But starting him is like in my top 10.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I mean, last week was his first finish better than QB12 since week 4.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
that's why I mean,
it's been rough.
to me,
Like
he's not like a
he's a limited
QB2.
ceiling. Maybe
Minnesota's
a decent
a good
floor.
matchup, though,
I mean,
is what Field's talking
guys
about.
are Gators
I
right
agree.
now.
I mean, he look
751 passing yards allowed over the past 2 weeks by Minnesota.
Who are the quarterbacks that they did that with?
Mac Jones
Okay.
and Mike White.
Well, those are not
both
very
said-
Well, Mike White is a star, except for this week.
I feel like Jared Goff fits in with that.
751 passing yards over the past 2 games.
Yeah,
They're
okay.
playing with tremendous confidence right now, are the Lions. And I know Mike, he said he hadn't had a game inside the top 12 since week 4. Jared Goff, and I said this on Sunday before the game even began, Jared Goff is an indoors quarterback. He's from California. I know he went to college in the Bay Area. He has always been better playing indoors for whatever reason. The entire Lions offense is better when playing indoors. This week, I'm in. Week 17 against Chicago, championship week, I'm in as well. If you look at the numbers, they do bear it out, by the way. He's had 3 games on the road this season. They've been clunkers, 9.1 fantasy points per game. In the other 8 games, nearly 20 fantasy points per game. I'm fine with Jared. I like Jared Goff this week. You guys are.
So would you
You
say
have a
he's?
starter? You would put him in your top 10.
He's really close to my top 10 this week.
So you would say much like Lawrence and Jones, you stream him when the matchup's right.
Oh, yeah.
Almost
So,
like-
yeah, specific to this week.
There's like
yes.
20 quarterbacks like that.
Rollin
this
for
year, right?
this week. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, he is close to my top 10 for this week. He is.
And that's because we have 6 teams on the bye.
6 teams on a bye, and I'm optimistic though. Like the Vikings can't defend anybody right now, guys.
No.
It's
They took over from the Lions.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate that. Hopefully, Amon-Ra St. Brown keeps things rolling. He's been doing well.
like Mike White. That number could have easily been 400 for Mike White with 2 touchdown passes, easily.
And Goff's numbers might look better if they weren't like Jamal Williams just wasn't running everything.
Right.
And I feel like they get tackled at the 1 yard line in every
Oh
single
my
drive.
gosh.
And
Thank
then
you.
Williams just runs.
Feeding my,
even Swift has a lot of rushing.
What a great
touchdowns.
point you just made right there.
Yeah.
I'm helping your cause here.
About time you showed up with one. All right, let's talk about some running backs here. We got the Packers. Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has been running back 9 from weeks 10 through 13. A.J. Dillon, running back 25, in spite of what happened this last week where A.J. Dillon was the guy holding down for this Packers backfield. But when you look at this Packers backfield,
Hey.
I don't think that I see anything different with what I've seen the whole rest of the season. Aaron
Context,
Jones is going to keep being the guy. He's going to keep being the pass catcher. Maybe A.J. Dillon gets the hot hand, so they run with him every little bit. But it's clearing away Aaron Jones, and I'm still rolling with him. I think he continues to roll the rest of the season.
Context is important here. 2 weeks
Yes.
ago against the Eagles on Sunday Night Football, Dillon has a big run that leads to I think he ended up finishing with more fantasy points than Jones. But Jones still had 16 fantasy points in that game against Philadelphia. A different stratosphere as far as pass catchers go. The Packers designed a bunch of pass plays for Aaron Jones. And this past week, Jones got hurt. He got hurt. He left the game for a while with a
He
shin
came
injury.
into that game with that injury, and
Yeah.
then we talked about it. I think we mentioned it on Fantasy Football Now. There were at some point we were talking about the two of them, and I said Aaron Jones is not 100%. He's dealing with 2 different injuries, and he leaves by aggravating one of them that was already there. So that's the thing that makes me think they will split the utilization a little bit more, just because he's not running at 100%. Pass catching, yes, but you're not going to get a lot of extra yards from him right now.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know specifically on the utilization, but Jones did return in that game.
Yep.
So that's why A.J. Dillon had the dominant snap share. To me, though, it's still pretty clear. It's Aaron Jones, and it's not close.
Yeah, I'm with you. Still leaning Jones here. Remember, Dillon has the back-to-back good games, one because Jones was hurt. Before that was his 2 weeks
First
ago.
in
That
11
was his
weeks.
first double-digit fantasy performance
Since,
since week one.
week
Since
one,
week
yeah.
one. So I'm not trusting Dillon yet. Jones is still the preferred play. Of course, like to your point, we have to keep an eye on his health, obviously.
Rolling on Jones, Foldin on Dillon. What about Najee Harris? Do you think he keeps rolling towards the last month of the season, Mike Clay, or would you think there's going to be a Foldin kind of
Are we
option?
saying he's rolling though? Like,
Well,
are we?
that's the thing. In comparison to the rest of his season, the last couple weeks, he is sort of ish rolling.
Well, it's 1 week though, right? Week 11, 28 fantasy points. Otherwise, outside the top 25 of his last 6. So he had that one game where he spiked, and you thought maybe he's healthy now and can get rolling. That's it though. So he has not been good. It's kind of a mid-pack schedule the rest of the way. They play the Browns in week 18. If you play that long, I guess that's a good matchup. But otherwise, it's kind of mid-pack. So no, I don't feel great starting Harris right now. I mean, we're going to rank him probably borderline top 20. And just not feel great about it.
Not feel good about it.
I mean, they used Jalen Warren and Benny Snell this past week with Harris. So it's been a rough go. It's been a rough go.
That is tough. Understanding that DeAndre Swift looked like he was getting more usage this last week, and we've been, one of the reasons we've been a little low on DeAndre Swift because we weren't sure how much usage he would get. Are we fully past the, if you did Najee Harris or DeAndre Swift in your lineup?
Oh, I'm going
We're
Swift.
all the way
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
on
I'm
DeAndre
back
Swift
in
now.
on Swift. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of playing time last week. Was it 51% of the snaps?
Yeah, that was
Step
a
forward.
big
Yeah.
jump forward from what they've been doing with him.
Yeah, and he got passing game opportunities, which Najee for I don't know what the reason is, but he's not getting
They have evaporated.
anywhere close to the same passing game utilization as last year when he led all running backs in terms of catches. Frustration.
Can we talk about James Cook in the way
Sure,
that he
yeah,
looked
absolutely.
against the Patriots on Thursday? I mean, does this performance and what he did on Thursday Night Football give you any kind of an indication that maybe he will keep it rolling towards the second half of this?
Most important thing for me with James Cook on the positive side was the eye test was really good.
Yes.
Right? He looked very
looked
sharp,
really
14 carries for 64 yards. He had 6 catches for 41 yards. That was his forte coming out of Georgia. He was a great pass catcher with the Bulldogs, was expected to be a productive pass catcher for the Bills. He has had moments, but has not been particularly consistent because Devin Singletary, who played exactly one more snap than James Cook. They actually updated the snap shares after they do a run every single, I think it's Tuesday. They run through all the snap shares to make sure they're accurate. Devin Singletary played one more snap than James Cook. He got a goal line carry that James Cook did not get. And by the way, Nyheim Hines played 23 snaps to 32 for James Cook. So it's still 3-man committee. So
Yes.
Is it possible that the Bills are saying to themselves, we need to get more out of James Cook? Maybe. We've also seen him have 10 carries in a game before and then fade back to what he had been. So I'm not ready to fully commit. I have the Bills running backs ranked like pretty close. Cook checks in highest for me, but I don't know offhand. I think it's like RB28 versus RB27 or something. Sure. There are a handful of backfields. Miami, I'm also looking at you, where I'm in that same spot.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's tough. It's a high-scoring offense, but they're going to use all 3 guys. And Nyheim Hines, that was his highest snap count with Buffalo, and he just continues to trend up. And if they're in competitive games or trailing, he's going to play a lot. So I'm not super excited about any of these guys. Also, the most durable running back in the NFL, and there's obviously some luck involved with this, but it's Evan Singletary.
Yeah,
he hasn't missed a game in 2.5 years now. He's awesome.
Boy.
He's always on the field.
Did it.
Wow.
What is it
Now I
about
think,
those?
come on.
You know what though? This is so Devin Singletary, not exactly tall. Frank Gore, not exactly tall. Yep. They both come from the South Florida area. Obviously, the U for Frank Gore, FAU for Devin Singletary.
Devin Singletary is Frank Gore. Field Yates just said that.
Both played for the Buffalo
Both
Bills.
played
Going
for
to the Hall of
Bills.
Fame.
Just saying. Yeah.
Some parallels.
Anything
I can see
else?
some parallels.
Okay. Yeah.
Nope, I got nothing else.
All right. There we go.
Let's talk about Dameon Pierce. Stephania, let's talk about Dameon Pierce. Come on. Dameon Pierce, after 2 really tough weeks. This last week, listen, 18 carries for 73 yards? Is that what it was? 18 carries for 73 yards in spite of how bad his first 2 weeks were. How are you looking at Dameon Pierce understanding the Texans offense?
I think the talent's undeniable. He had 2 tough matchups in those weeks where he didn't produce. And we had said that we expected more from him this week, given the matchup, given the talent level. He's about the only thing really clicking for the Houston Texans. So I'm still on the Dameon Pierce rolling train. Dallas is going to be a tough matchup just for them in general.
Of course.
But I think other than that, I'm fine with him, especially the matchups they have there on out.
And Mike, you told us on Fantasy Football Now, you sort of called this bounce back, saying, I'm not worried about it. There's a situation where against the Browns, he's going to get a ton of volume still.
Yeah, I wish we got more. I mean,
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, at least he got to 95 yards, but he hasn't scored in 5 straight games. You look at when he kind of had that breakout earlier this season, 3 straight weeks, he had at least 18 fantasy points, and we thought, here we go. He's playing 90% of the snaps. The breakout's happening. But since then, 11 fantasy points per game. He's been under 16 in every game, right? So
I think part of it is their offense is sputtered
But that's not gonna
completely.
get
So
better,
it's
though.
like, that's
not going to get better. That's the problem.
Well,
Yeah. No, I would say that
are they going back to Davis Mills? Like that?
Are they going to Baker Mayfield? I don't know.
I'd be surprised on Baker, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised though. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad that you framed it the way that you did. Is that like I'm happy to roll with him this week because there are very few running backs to start otherwise. But like, I don't know that we are going to be sitting here championing the cause for a guy who like had 12. It was like, yeah, he's back with 12.5 fantasy points, baby.
I know.
Let's ride,
That's
right?
good.
Like,
Yeah,
what is
exactly.
that? Like, do you want 12.5 fantasy points? It's not his fault. It's nothing to do with him. I get it.
Yeah.
But once
He's-
again, we're dealing with 6 teams on bye. That's a lot of running backs gone. And he does catch passes. And that
Somewhat.
It's he's going to get about 80% of the carries, 10% of the targets. That's hard to bench. But
Volume,
in that offense,
that's still a lot of
it is
volume.
it is volume. And it's Dallas, by the way. Really good defense again. So I don't know. He's a mid-range RB2.
He's a tough one to figure out because unless that offense gets better, it feels like his talent is not going to live up to its full potential with where we're at. Not with what we expect, now with
Nature
what
of the
we've
NFL.
seen earlier this year. So let's talk about Christian Watson. Wide receiver 3.
Here we go.
From weeks 10 through 13, wide receiver 3. Mike, I'm going to start with you because I think you and I probably see this the same way. I think this is unbelievably unsustainable given the amount of targets and volume that he is getting. But where are you at?
Yeah, I'm a little nervous about the usage, right? 6 targets exactly in 3 straight games.
Yeah.
Not at least 6 targets, exactly 6 targets. Does have a bunch of touchdowns, obviously 7 in his last 4 games. That is terrific. But look, since week 10, he's 3rd in fantasy points at wide receiver, but he's 26th in targets, 32nd in catches, right? That's not enough volume to sustain anything close to what he was doing. But here's the good news. They have arguably the easiest remaining
I was
schedule
just going to
for
say their
receivers.
schedule. I
talked
mean, they
about
have a
this
bye
weeks ago.
this week, unfortunately.
Yeah. So going forward, obviously after the bye, he could be a league winner during the fantasy playoffs because maybe with the good matchups, he does see more volume and scores a couple touchdowns. It's not going to be 7 in 4 games, but he looks like the real deal too.
does.
More than anything
Looks
else,
really
he looks
good.
like an established number 1 right now.
Yeah, I would say let's just like put our like human side hat on here for a second. You're rolling with him. You are. You're playing Christian Watson in week 15 when they come out of their bye.
There's no way that someone has put up 20-plus fantasy points that many games in a row.
You're not going to be the idiot. Now, eventually the bubble's going to burst, and he's going to have like 8 fantasy points in a game, and it's going to be a bummer.
And it's going to be in the playoffs.
But
and
what
it's
if
gonna
that?
make you
What if
lose.
that 8 comes in 17 in week 17, and instead he gets you 22 and 15 and 16? You're like, all right, sweet. I'm glad I continue to buy him. Play him, I should say.
I'm with you. It's not like it's a CEH thing during the first month. It's not like that, right? He's still going to be on the field and could see 6 to 8 targets a game. I need that number to go up, right? I don't want this to turn into like Devontae Smith, right, where he just disappears and has 2 targets. Like We need those targets to go up 1 or 2. Go from 6 a game to 8 a game, and then we'll be happy.
When you're talking about wide receivers that average 6 targets per game, you're not talking about guys that average 20 plus
flex
fantasy
options.
points.
So
No,
here's
it's
the
not
question.
sustainable.
Romeo Dobbs could come back in the next 2 weeks. So after the bye, if Romeo Dobbs comes back, what happens to Christian Watson?
Nothing, I don't think.
I was going to say
Yeah.
nothing.
Well,
I think Dobbs will be the 4 now. That's my guess.
I would expect so. But Aaron Rodgers, if Christian Watson drops a ball, look out.
I don't know. They're
fickle.
producing now. I think Watson's cemented.
In a good
I mean,
spot.
we've seen crazier things, but I'd be shocked if that happened.
What about Amari Cooper Field? We got this
Yeah, fine with it. Good.
1 week under
Rollin.
center. You're good.
Rollin.
with Ro-
This is a simple, not overthinking it too much. Tough matchup this week. The Bengals, I'm just impressed with the Bengals defense. But he had 9 of 21 targets this past week.
Do you any of this with the first week with Deshaun under center? Obviously, the
It was
offense
ugly.
looked roughed.
He looked bad. We'll see. As we talked about this on Sunday, you and I, Daniel, with Liz, is that like it's hard to imagine that Deshaun Watson is like Russell Wilson, where it seemingly happens overnight, where it just regresses in such a significant way that it impacts the offense in perpetuity. But I'm not sure that it gets dramatically better this week, but still, I mean, he had 9 targets. He had 4 catches for 40 yards. Like, if that number had been 6 for 52, we're probably not having this conversation at all. So I'm still fine. I'm rolling with Amari Cooper, really talented player, and I think this offense gets better regardless of what the matchups are or are not, and they actually are not that bad beyond Cincinnati going forward.
Agreed. Yep.
I'm cool with it.
Yeah,
You
mid-pack
set it and
schedule.
forget it. Wide receiver
Yeah,
probably less.
definitely. I mean, even this week, like to your point, no team has allowed fewer receptions to receivers than the Bengals. We're still starting Amari Cooper, right? He's just too good. He had a good game against them the first time. Granted, Awuzie went down in that game, and Eli Apple didn't play, but still, Amari Cooper is a lineup block still.
Yep.
What about Darius Slayton, Mike Clay? Let's talk about some
How lucky
deeper
do you
wide
feel?
receivers here, right? When Daniel Jones has got to throw the football to somebody. Darius Slayton has been a guy that has sort of come on for him. Feels tough to be able to trust a situation or a wide receiver like Darius Slayton, but still, he's somebody that, you think that he continues to be able to roll, or
He is, since week 7, 25th at receiver in fantasy points. He's just kind of hung in there. He doesn't have a lot of spike games, but he's been over 11 in 6 of his last 8 games. He's been fine. He's just hanging on the flex radar in 12-team leagues. But this is a very tough matchup. So if you're looking for an excuse to bench him, this would be it. I would say about 75% of the time he's going to be up against Darius Slay and James Bradbury
Those guys
in
are
this
good.
game.
They're
Eagles have allowed the fewest fantasy points to the perimeter. It's a really tough matchup. You like what he's done lately. Don't want to start him
Not
against
this
the Eagles.
week.
Yeah, I think it would be tough. Any Giants wide receiver in the playoffs when
How
I'm
are
in
they
a
still
win or go
scoring?
home spot, I don't know.
This is why they're doing nothing in the passing game, because it's like Isaiah Hodgins, Richie James, and Darius Slayton, who they were trying to get rid of the whole offseason. That's their receivers
It's
right now.
been tough. It's been really tough. Stephania, let's close out on a tight end in Cole Kmet. There's no way
I
that
think you saw the potential with him and Justin Fields. Like, we started to see that happening, and then when Justin Fields gets hurt, and now he's back, and all of a sudden Cole Kmet gets targeted more heavily again.
How did Justin Fields look to you coming back from
Fine.
injury? Any thoughts
Yeah.
or concerns?
No, I think he could still run.
Yeah,
So
we saw
obviously
that.
the shoulder injury didn't impact his ability to run, and the main thing was for him to be able to protect himself. And he did that. He got through the game without getting any worse. It doesn't mean he's 100% as far as the shoulder goes. There's still some of that risk there, but it's not going to impact how you're going to evaluate him for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, one game doesn't make a sample size, but a lot of people pointed this out. He had just 3 design runs on Sunday, did Justin Fields. That number was oftentimes double or even triple that during that ridiculous stretch prior to the game that he missed.
And his scramble rate is
But
off the charts. So
right.
he'll keep running. Yeah.
And he took advantage of it.
Plus, he only needs 2 runs to get 6 straight games with a rushing touchdown. He has 3 50-plus yard rushing touchdowns this season. No other quarterback has 3 50-plus yard rushing touchdowns for his entire career. He's done it over the past 2 months.
Isn't it crazy how we keep upping the bar like Lamar Jackson, and then it's Jalen Hurts, who's like first in expected touchdowns this year in the whole league. Like all that goalie mark. And now it's Justin Fields doing what he's doing. It's just we keep upping the bar for rushing quarterbacks.
By the way, Justin Fields is currently on pace for 1,206.67 rushing yards this season. The record for most rushing yards by a quarterback in a season, Lamar Jackson with 1,206.
Wow.
So he's 2/3 of a yard above Lamar's rate. Lamar played just 15 games that season. Of course, Justin Fields will play a maximum of 16 this season. So It's possible. It's possible he breaks that record.
What about, okay, really quickly, on Justin Fields' tight end, Cole Kmet. Has he become a set it and forget it tight end with the way that this tight end position has worked out?
Yeah, I mean, he's third in fantasy points
From
per
week
game
8
during that
13.
5-week span.
Let me
with
ask you-
Fields. I think so. Back in
Bye
tight end
week,
one.
Is he
Philly
active?
and Buffalo.
Yeah.
Is he active this week?
No.
He's not. Okay.
No.
So next
Bye
week.
and then he
Is he
plays
active?
Philly.
Is he active? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, next week. He's active. Okay. Does he have hands that function?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe.
Does his quarterback have an arm that functions?
We believe he does, yes.
Okay, good. All right. Then you're officially on the tight end radar.
That's where you're
That's the
at.
criteria.
That's a good point.
Bye week, Philly and Buffalo, though. Like that, you can't use them this upcoming week, and then it feels like two tough matchups back to back with Philly and Buffalo.
Oh, you're about to
But
lose
then you get
another.
your Lions and the Vikings.
All right, I didn't.
You're about to
that.
lose
I said
another, kind of solid tight end in Hayden Hurst.
That's true.
So
That's
you
true.
won't
down
have
for the
him.
play. Yeah.
Zach, I know you replied to this on Twitter. Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert last played in Week 10. They're still top 6 scorers at tight end.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
That's how bad tight end is. So yeah, that makes Cole Kmet
Travis
seem appetizing.
Kelce.
Yikes.
Every single year. Travis Kelce. Don't tell me about him being a reach ever. He's on a reach. He will go first overall next year, and I would feel not bad at all about it.
I appreciate you not looking at me while saying that. After our
No, we had a
many
conversation.
Andrews versus Kelsey arguments.
Oh, well, whatever. I mean,
I mean, that
last thought
worked.
here. We have to get to Eric Moody here in a second, but I appreciate this from our friend Zach Lowe. He's just absolutely tremendous. He's the best basketball mind in the entire NBA. It's not even close. He talked about this in his podcast. He said, I don't like to crow about the things that I got right because really, first of all, show a little humility. Okay, it's our job to be right on things. These podcasts are often about things we got wrong because we're trying to learn from them. You know what? It's a game of projection and guessing. So if you're pissed off that we got something wrong, I'm sorry. But we're going to do our best to be accountable and say, here's where I thought things were going to go. They didn't go there. Here's what I have learned. Here's what I'm going to try to be better this upcoming
You know what
week.
I just heard? Instead of you gloating about Kelsey, you're gloating about how humble you are.
Yep.
You're like, I'm the humblest. Look how humble I am.
Right. I mean, listen, you want me to tell you about all the things that I got right this season? No one wants to hear that. All right?
I do.
You do?
Tell me. Yeah.
All right, listen, I had
We got
Patrick
all day.
Mahomes as a top 5 quarterback coming into the year.
Nailed it.
So,
All right. You're good at
ESPN
this.
has approached me about a raise due to
big
that
deal.
fact.
No big deal.
Well deserved. Well deserved.
Yes.
All right, we're going to get to our buddy Eric Moody here in a second. But first, Mike Clay.
Ah, yes. Let's talk about Miller Lite.
Let's do it.
Tis
now
the
I'm thirsty.
season. Yes. 'Tis the season to get together with good friends and great drinks. And that means 'tis Miller time. Sure, the holidays can be stressful, and so can the fantasy playoffs. All the more reason to raise a glass or can to keeping things uncomplicated. Since 1975, Miller Lite has been the beer with taste you can depend on. No games, no gimmicks, just great beer. Not only is Miller Lite a great tasting light beer, it's also a great gift for the beer lovers in your life. And for even more gift ideas, perfect for beer lovers, visit the Miller Lite shop site at shop.millerlite.com. Their new holiday collection features everything from cozy beer-inspired holiday sweaters to drinkable ornaments for your tree. This holiday, 'tis Miller time, so enjoy Miller time with family and friends. Miller Lite, great taste, 96 calories. Go to MillerLite.com/FFF to find delivery options near you so you can give the gift of Miller time this holiday season, or you can pick up some Miller Lite pretty much anywhere they sell beer. 'Tis Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 96 calories and 3.2 carbs for 12 ounces.
Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance? Well, of course you would. When it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help. With insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV, even help with your homeowners or renters coverage. Plus, add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. And Geico is just an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways that you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today. All right, and we are here talking waiver wire with our friend Eric Moody. What is up, Eric? How you doing, bud?
No, I'm doing pretty good. I'm fully caffeinated, ready to rock and roll. I was a little under the weather over the weekend, but hey, I'm feeling great and ready to talk about the waiver wire, my friend.
The waiver wire is brought to you by Geico. Switch to Geico and see all the ways that you could save. Heading into this, Eric Moody, we're going to let the people know Week 14 buys include the Falcons, the Bears, the Packers, the Colts, the Saints, and the Commanders. 6 teams on a bye, the last bye week of the NFL season. So, Eric, let's talk about the quarterback position because we have guys that we have been counting on. We will not be able to have this week. Where are you going on the waiver wire here in Week 14 at the quarterback spot?
And, we talked about this quarterback before, and I'm sure this name is very dear to your heart, Dopp, but we're going to talk about Jared Goff once again. It's just like The Godfather Part 3, with Michael Corleone, where it's just like, just when I think I'm out on Jared Goff, I just keep getting pulled back in. I'm like, that's how I feel right now.
Pulling me back
And
in.
he had a great game. I know, right? I'm like, he had a great game against Jacksonville. 21.6 fantasy points. Played very well at home. His third game with 20 or more fantasy points at home this season. And one thing about Goff, I'm like, he's got Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's got great rapport with him. Jamison Williams is there. DJ Shark is healthy. So he's got some playmakers. And he's going up against a Vikings team this week that's allowing 20 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. So if you're in need of a quarterback or a streamer, look no further than Jared Goff.
Yeah, I don't mind Jared Goff this week against Minnesota. It is not a bad matchup. I am totally with you on that. Don't love him next week against the Jets, as Jared Goff is not an outdoor kind of quarterback. However, the Jets have their own quarterback, Eric Moody, that could maybe be used as a streaming option here in Week 14.
Exactly. Let's talk about Mike White. 2 consecutive games of 17 or more fantasy points. And he's also had 300 or more passing yards in each game. And one thing about the Jets coaching staff with Robert Saleh is that, they're taking this at like a week-by-week kind of view where they're determining like what steps need to be made. And so I think with Mike White knowing that he has to perform week in and week out to maintain the starting job, I think that bodes, very well. They're throwing a lot of passes, which is good, for fantasy, since Mike White is not a mobile quarterback, we'll say. So you're not getting that Konami code fantasy point addition, from someone like Mike White. But in this matchup against the Bills, I see the Jets needing to score early and often to at least try to maintain pace with the Bills. Because you look at Buffalo. They rank second in total yards per game at nearly 411 total yards, and third in points per game at nearly 28. And so I'm looking at Mike White against Buffalo as someone with I would say a QB2 floor, but if he limits the interceptions, you're looking at someone that can give you low-end QB1 upside, in my opinion.
Heck yeah. We've watched him each of the last 2 weeks, like you said, over 300 yards passing. We've watched this Jets offense become more alive with Mike White under center. And it's not just Mike White that is usable in fantasy, Eric, as there is a running back with Michael Carter out that you also like that can be used off the waiver wire here this week.
Yeah, you're right, Dopp. So let's talk about Zonovan Knight, once again. Second straight game with over 100 total yards and 13 or more fantasy points. And he did have 60% of the touches in both of those games. And so it's a crowded backfield. I know you got Carter who's out dealing with the low ankle sprain. You've got James Robinson that's there. You got Ty Johnson. But I keep going back to kind of coach speak here, because here's what Robert Saleh said, is that they're looking for someone to spark the backfield. He said that a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what Zonovan Knight can do to provide a greater spark. And so even if Michael Carter comes back this week or next week, I still see Knight being actively involved in this backfield. And we've seen how explosive that he is. And he's got fresh legs too, because he hasn't played much up until this point. So I like Knight really as a flex option with upside. I think fantasy managers have gotten a taste of what he's capable of. And, you must admit, it seems very good. What do you think, Dopp?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. He has looked really good over each of the last 2 weeks, especially coming out of nowhere here for this Jets team. Gets the Buffalo Bills this week. Tough matchup, so we'll see how that works out. However, if he's heavily utilized in this passing game and the Jets are down, then, he's still someone that can give you a really nice fantasy floor at the running back position. However, the Bills have their own running back that you could potentially grab off the waiver wire this week if Zonovan Knight is not available, and that's in James Cook, Eric Moody.
Yeah, no, I really do like James Cook. So we look at last week. Stockpiled 105 total yards on 20 touches against the Patriots. Last Thursday, played one fewer snap than Devin Singletary. Here's why I'm really optimistic for the rest of the fantasy season on James Cook, is that I think the Bills could use from this point on really as a mini audition for Cook. Because you got Devin Singletary that's played well for most of this year. But he's someone that's going to be an unrestricted free agent after the season. And so I could see this being a nearly 50-50 committee, but I think they really want to examine and analyze what they have here with Cook. And you got to admit, he looked great last week, so I think this trend continues. He's someone else that I'm kind of viewing as a flex option with upside moving forward.
Yeah, would love to see him continue to be utilized and get more touches within this offense as we get into the playoff hunt for fantasy teams here. So like James Cook. Any other running backs really quick you want to talk about before we move on to pass catchers?
Yeah, I'm sitting there thinking, how am I going to phrase this? But I would look at Travis Homer, my biggest, my biggest, I guess my biggest complaint with this whole situation, and we should know more soon, is that the Seahawks backfield is complicated, we'll say. You got Kenneth Walker, who's been great. He's down with an ankle injury. DJ Dallas comes in. Yes, I'm going to help this team. I go out with an ankle injury. Then you've got Travis Homer, who was ruled out of last week's game, who, when you look at the running back room, I would say he's like the last man standing and like the healthiest running back available. And so you just want to plug in whoever's going to start or get most touches for this team, because Seattle does like to run the football, and they've got a pretty good matchup on tap against the Carolina Panthers. But another gripe that I have is with head coach Pete Carroll. I'm like, I could have my arm like dangling off right now, but he's saying, you know what, Moody's good to play this week. I think he's good. He's looking good out there. What do you think?
Yeah.
He's overly optimistic. He's overly optimistic. So keep that in mind when you're deciding who to target on the waiver wire when you're looking at the Seattle Seahawks backfield. So that's all I have to say about that.
Very fair, and something that we talked about with Stephania as well. Definitely make sure that you make other plans. If you do have Kenneth Walker, in spite of him saying maybe he could go this week, Travis Homer would be somebody that could potentially step in, and we'll see how the rest of this backfield shakes out. All right, couple of wide receivers to get out of here. Eric, let's talk with the Dallas Cowboys, where Michael Gallup looked pretty good last week, someone that you could be targeting on the waiver wire this week.
Yeah, I really like Michael Gallup. I know he was coming off of an injury, earlier this season. He looks healthy. He's getting targets. 7 targets in consecutive games. Saw a season or a career high, I would say, 3 red zone targets last week against the Colts. And his target shares look really good, north of 23% in 3 of his past 5 games. And I know there's a lot of chatter around Odell Beckham, whether or not the Cowboys will sign him. I'm like, Gallup should still continue to be involved, at least for most of the fantasy football season, because it's going to take Beckham, even if he's signed by the Cowboys, a couple of weeks to get ramped up. So if you need a wide receiver, I pick up Michael Gallup. So
you don't worry about the addition of OBJ and what it could do for Michael Gallup's fantasy options. Your feelings are that it would take OBJ a little while to get spun up, so he doesn't bother you from that aspect.
No, he doesn't. It's going to take some time for him to get acclimated to that team, the playbook. I think it's more of a move that Dallas is positioning itself for success in like the real life NFL playoffs. I don't think it'll have much of a fantasy impact.
Okay. What about Donovan Peoples-Jones, someone that we liked a whole lot with Jacoby Brissett under center? We watched him have a really high floor, and then now the switch to Deshaun Watson. Obviously, week 1 was tough. Did not look great. A lot of rust for that Browns quarterback. However, DPJ is still someone that you could definitely look at that could have some good value here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you look at DPJ, I really liked him quite a bit this season, and I've talked about him a lot on the waiver wire column and also on the show. And he looked like he had pretty good rapport with Deshaun Watson. I know he was uneven in his first start and like an eternity, but I think there's something there. And one thing about DPJ, in 7 of his last 9 games, he scored 10 or more fantasy points. And so I look at Donovan Peoples-Jones as someone that you can plug in as a flex option with upside. He's really got the number 2 wide receiver spot in Cleveland on lockdown, and they're going to need all the help that they can get. So I will pick him up if you need a wide receiver.
Absolutely. I am totally with you. Love Donovan Peoples-Jones to close out the year, someone that I think should be at the end of people's rosters. There's just too much potential upside there. There just is. You got to make sure that you go out roster Donovan Peoples-Jones. All right. Eric Moody, you are amazing. Thank you so much for coming on every Tuesday. Follow him at Eric N. Moody on Twitter. Check out his daily notes where he gives you a daily dosage of everything that you need to know what's going on within the fantasy atmosphere. Eric, thanks for hanging out with us, buddy.
Oh, absolutely. Looking forward to the next time. Take care.
All right. And for Eric and Field, Stephania, Mike, myself, everybody behind the scenes with Kyle and all the people that you don't get to see, please know we love you so much. Thank you for taking time to hang out with us today. It is not lost on us how much it means that you give us an hour of your day to spend with us. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. You have earned that. It's okay to love yourself today. Have fun with the rest of the day. We love you. We can't wait to see you on Wednesday. We'll talk rankings. We'll see you then.